What's up YouTube, it's Geoffrey again. Today we're doing a creepypasta, a gaming creepypasta. Today we're doing The Lion King, so let's get to it. There are so many creepypastas out there about haunted video games and things of that nature. I just read them and always pass them off as just as that. Fake, silly creepypasta stories, though they were very entertaining. I never expected something to happen to me. It seems like the worst things always tend to happen to those that are unsuspecting and cynical, doesn't it? Well, I was at a time of disappointment in my life. I'd become very ill and forced to drop out of college. I hated having my dreams being put on hold, and I have been suffering a mild case of depression because of it. But there was still comfort that can only come from being back home that reassured me a bit. But there was still the boredom I had to deal with. No job, no college, and I hate to say it, little friends, most still in college themselves, made each day drag by. The days spent watching TV and old VHS movies in that familiar living room gave me some inspiration to find a way to ease my ever interesting tedium. My VHS and DVD library had dwindled down to my old Disney movies left unwatched, so I watched one of my all-time favorites, The Lion King. The cute lion cubs remind me of a almost forgotten piece of my past, and it was the old 1994 Lion King PC video game I used to play constantly as a child. My mom and I used to spend hours trying to win that old game. The flood of old memories sent me walking back to my bedroom to the ancient computer that still sat on a desk in the corner. I've been so proud of that old computer when I first bought it. At the age of 11, I saved up enough of my money to buy it myself. It was heartwarming to see the old startup screen and hear the old jingle as Windows XP started up. The bulky old computer grown to life, and I clicked the start button to search for my old games. Sadly, the game folder was barren and empty. Disappointed, I walked in to ask my mom what happened to all of our games. She looked a little sad, probably seeing the dissatisfaction in my eyes. She told me since I had purchased a brand new laptop a month or so ago, my dad was going to sell the old computer. He had taken all the old documents and games and removed them. She then suggested I ask my dad if he had saved any of them. Later that night, my dad returned from his job at the factory, tired and worn out. He landed on the couch to do something like he usually does to relax, look up stuff on his laptop. So I walked over and asked him what the fate of my childhood memories had been. He regretted to say that he didn't think that I would care about them anymore, and he deleted them. I was clearly saddened by that. I've been looking forward to skydiving into an ocean of nostalgia. Hating to see his little girl, all 19 years of her, upset, he said he'd go online to download as many of the old games as he can from freeware sites and things of that. Gladly, my dad did find and download the 1994 Lion King SEGA Genesis game, my old favorite. Now, this game isn't like the modern Disney games out there. It wasn't a babyish activity center or a storybook game. It was a story, yes, but it was an action game. The gist of it was that you started out as a young Simba as he defeats innocent villains and animals such as chameleons, porcupines, frogs, spiders, vultures, and horror villains, hyenas. Young Simba can defeat these adversaries by simply jumping on them. Except the porcupines. You had to snarl to flip them over and then jump on them. Older Simba was more violent. He could slash, maul, and flip his enemies over. Some of them even showing small amounts of blood flying from him with each hit. Nothing gory. You can never see any injury on the enemies. But at the age of 4 years old, that sounded like major carnage. The next morning, I was glad to have the whole house myself to play the game. Again, my dad was at work and my mom was off to Lexington, Kentucky to help my almost 80-year-old grandma. It was at times like this that it pays to have no siblings. So I grabbed a bowl of M&Ms and some sweet tea and retreated to my room for the day. My dad had installed the game into the bulky old gray and black computer the night before, but I hadn't seen if it worked or not. I prayed if it did, and as I clicked on the file, it worked to my delight. When I saw the grainy old startup screen, the picture of Pride Rock with Rafiki holding a baby Simba. I pressed enter to start the game. Timon the meerkat appeared on the screen and said the old familiar words, "It starts." I worked my way through the colorful levels with ease. I remembered every trick and bonus. Everything went well, and I was having a good old-fashioned fun time like I used to as a little kid. I made it to the last level, the Pride Rock level, where adult Simba battles Scar. I made it halfway through the level, battling Scar 2 to 3 times and killing off hyena after hyena. I was having a perfect game until I made one mistake. I misjudged a jump and missed the platform I was aiming for, sending Simba plunging into the darkness in between. That's when things started to go wrong. Instead of just fading to black and starting the level over like it was supposed to, the screen began flashing colors red, black, and purple, and a sound that isn't supposed to be in the game. I should have known. I played this game hundreds of times and memorized every part of it. The sound was from the movie. It was the moment of the infamous stampede scene where Mufasa fell to his doom. It was Simba's scream. Then there was a screeching sound, so loud I jumped and turned down my volume speakers. I figured out it was just a hacked version of the game, and someone thought it would be a good idea to make the game better by adding sound clips from the movie. But instead of returning to the level I was on, the game restarted from the beginning. That made me annoyed since I'd gone so far, but then the startup screen changed. Instead of the cheery screen I remember from my childhood, or from 2 seconds ago for that matter, it was dark, blurry, and odd colored, red, black, and blue. It almost looked like a night shot of the original screen. But I thought it might be just a glitch and I pressed start anyways. Instead of Timon saying his normal "it starts" phrase, there was a strip of red writing which seemed to flash and twist on the screen. It said a quote I recognized and actually loved: "The boundaries which life from death are at best shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and the other begins?" A quote from my favorite author, Edgar Allan Poe. I was actually a little happy to see my favorite quote, but couldn't help to feel a little uneasy. Why was it on a Disney game? And I knew for sure it didn't belong there, but I played anyway. The first level was all wrong. First off, I had no lives left when I should have had 8, and the sky was pitch black. The first level was usually a cheery, sunny level. Worst of all, young cub Simba was lying down in an unnatural, crumpled up position. He was bloody and shaking. This wasn't the Disney norm at all, for the heck of it, as I tried to move him with the arrow keys, and he reached his arm out slowly and dragged himself across the ground, leaving a trail of crimson blood behind him like a slug leaves a trail of slime. The progression was slow, but the crisp autumn weather outside made me excited for Halloween, so I decided to try and play the disturbed version of my favorite game. When I needed to jump, the half-dead lion cub jumped almost like normal, except each jump he lost a body part. The body part of him, which was all bloody, fell into the crevice he was jumping. Each jump made our crumpled hero bloodier and bloodier. At the end of the level, the hyena was different too. His eyes glowed red, and he looked as if he had been slashed multiple times. I defeated it with 2 jumps, just in time as Simba's last leg fell off. I wondered what awaited me on the next level, as the first one faded to black. The "I just can't wait to be king" level was upside down and seemed to be melting on the screen, as well as being darker colored than it should. Simba was back to the original state he was on the first level. He dragged along as he made his way up to the rhinoceros. He jumped on the rhino's head, his tail falling off along the way, and the rhino flipped him up into the trees into the arms of the monkeys. This is the part where Simba is supposed to jump on the heads of the giraffes over water to the other side. But there was a problem. The giraffes were beheaded, bloodily with amazingly disgusting detail. I could see the bone sticking out. I thought whoever hacked this game had even more of a dark side of me. But I wondered how battered Simba could get across the water, which was in this edition red, blood. But he jumped from the giraffe to giraffe by clinging onto the necks. The blood made him slip off quickly, so I had to jump quicker and quicker to keep from falling into the water. Later in the level, the ostrich he was supposed to be riding was beheaded and skinned with frightening realism. It looked like more like a photo I had saw it taken at fur farms of dead animals, Adolf Hitler, concentration camps, etc. The ostrich lurched in an odd, distorted way as it ran. The rest of the level was about the same. The monkeys beheaded and the tree set on fire, and Simba crawled through the upside-down madness. As that level faded, the screeching sound returned as well, as something unexpected. It was Mufasa's face, but instead of the gold color he should have been, he was all black and his eyes glowed green. He opened his mouth and said something in a hissing voice. "Scar's innocent." It was me. What did that mean? Was this twisted game trying to pass off that Mufasa was supposed to have let go of the cliff on purpose? I don't know why, but I was disturbed by that thought. Don't be stupid, I thought. Don't let a stupid game make you upset about fictional cartoon lions. Despite the nervousness I was experiencing, I continued to the elephant graveyard level. This one was right side up, thank God. And Simba, who was normal, was standing up straight like he's supposed to. Maybe the hacker got bored and decided to leave this level alone. My thoughts were proven wrong as soon as I thought them. The elephant graveyard was similarly devoid of life. No hyenas came to attack me as they were supposed to. I just thought as a easy way out and, began to run through the game. As I moved, I realized it wasn't going to be easy. A scream ripped loudly through the speakers and the monitor. Not just the screen, but the whole monitor shook. That freaked me out. But I figured that it was probably just vibrating from the loudness of the screams. Anyway, I had a new thing to worry about. The ground was literally falling apart under Simba's feet. I had to keep running through the desolate graveyard to keep from falling into the unknown darkness below me. And I ran, and I noticed that the spots that were supposed to be having hyenas instead had bloody-skinned corpses instead. And the same hissing voice of Mufasa I heard before sounded as I passed each one. Death is cruel to the just and the unjust. He repeated it over and over as the scream built up louder and louder behind it. Then the whole monitor began shaking more and more violently. Then very realistic blood started dripping down the screen. So realistic I was tempted to reach out and touch it. I indulged in my temptation and petrified as my finger became covered in sticky crimson blood. And as can be expected, I screamed and ran from the room. I ran into the bathroom and I slammed the door shut. My hands were trembling as I reached for the light switch. I half expected that distorted Mufasa face to be in front of me as I flipped on the light. Of course it wasn't, so I just sat down and curled into a ball. I suddenly hated being alone. I yearned for my parents to come home. It didn't help that I could still hear that scream from the other room, my room. As frightened as I was, I decided I had to go back and turn off the game. So I mustered up courage that was left in me and walked slowly back into the room. I was almost afraid to turn and look at the computer in a dark corner of the room. But when I did, I saw that the blood was gone. Maybe I just let this disturbing game get to me head and I hallucinated the blood. I mean, it's just a game, right? Weirder still is that the game had paused on its own, as if it knew that I fled the room. Maybe in my panic I had hit the enter button on the keyboard and just hadn't remembered it, but I sure didn't remember it. That thought was proven false as soon as I sat down on the chair. For as soon as I sat down, the game started up. The screaming, thankfully, stopped for the time being, and curiosity was urging me to keep going. I knew my dad would take away the defective game off as soon as he heard about it, so this is my only chance to see what's happening next. So I kept going. I finished the Elephant Graveyard level and prepared for the Stampede level, and whatever Dark Twist was next. But to my surprise, everything was normal in this level. The sky was blue, and the rocky canyon was a bright tan, just as I remembered it. Half of me was thankful, and the other half, the dark side half I had that I hide from most people, was bored. It was at the end of the level that things changed. After Simba escaped the wildebeests, the screen cuts to black abruptly and then continued to play a scene from the movie. Well, sort of. It was that moment where Mufasa was climbing up the rocks after rescuing Simba from the stampede. But then something different happened. It cut to Simba staring at his dad, struggling to climb up the canyon. The scene was not in the movie, although it was just animated, just as good quality as the real movie. Simba was crying as he knew his dad was not going to make it. Sobbing realistically, he then stopped suddenly and turned his eyes towards the screen. His eyes were empty and motionless, and he stared at me. Then he stood up and walked forward. The camera angle switched to behind him and revealed what he was walking to. The edge, the cliff. What is this? I can only watch in horror as he just walked off the cliff to the stampede below. Then the screen cut to Mufasa's face. He saw it. He saw Simba fall to his death. His eyes were filled with tears and he looked up to his brother. Scar, grinning down at him, said, "What are you going to do, brother?" His eyes were glowing at an odd red, and his paws were dripping with blood. "What do you have to live for?" Scar said. "Nothing," Mufasa answered, then turned down his face to the screen. "Nobody does." Then he let go off the cliff and fell. Then it showed Scar laughing evilly, his face slowly morphing into a hideous lion skull, pieces of flesh still clinging to it. His eyes started to drip blood as the screen faded black around the skull. Then he whispered, "It's true for you too, Heather," then chuckled and disappeared. Once again I found myself running from the room, this time in hysterics. If I thought I was trembling before then, this was my personal earthquake. In the bathroom I ended up throwing up into the toilet. Then I just sat there, whispering, "It's not real. It's not real." Tears ran down my face like the blood had from scars. How does this game know my name? That's not normal. But I was the adult in the house at this time, and it was up to me to go back into the room and then turn off that demonic game immediately. So I stomped into my bedroom angrily. I will not let a game control me. I glared towards the screen and noticed that Scar was gone. It was sitting there on the Simba's exile level, very normal looking, even had the appropriate sound for the game. Once again, curiosity got the better of me, and I dismissed the movie moment as my imagination got the better of me. So I decided to play the level. I was stupid. I knew that now, but I wasn't one to get freaked out that easily over things like that. I was still a guy or girl who likes to crave scary stuff. Loved them, in fact. So I played with a more cautious but curious attitude. I was just waiting for something else to happen. Not hoping for it like before, more like watching a video online and waiting for the screamer. The level was perfectly normal. Whoever hacked this game had a twisted sense of humor, I thought warily, luring you into a false sense of security, then freaking you out in a whole new way. I knew it was on the way, so I still jumped whenever it happened. Simba's exile level ended normally as the hyenas watched Simba escape through the thorns, and Bonsai the hyena said, "If you ever come back, we'll kill ya." But then it happened. Something freaky happened. The Hakuna Matata level started, but Simba could not move. It was like the game was locked up, except he was moving. Not running like I wanted him to, but shaking his head over and over and over again, as if he was trying to shake the bad thoughts from his head. Then suddenly, he looked straight ahead and fell to the ground, like he passed out. Only his eyes rolled out of his head and across the green jungle grass. Then the image twisted on itself and faded to black. Then it switched directly to the next level, skipping Hakuna Matata completely. It would only seem fitting that a game as dark as this would skip the happiest level. So now Simba is an adult. This is where the level representing him going to at night to see Rafiki. As an adult, he had his new powers of slashing and mauling. I mentioned before that the brief mild violence that normally was in the adult Simba's levels. Well, this was much worse. When Simba mauled a leopard, the leopard was ripped to pieces, and its body was left in a bloody mess, in pieces piled on top of each other. Each one he killed was murdered in the same merciless, violent way, and I should have known that like something like this was on the way. So then at the end, when he saw Rafiki the mandrill at the pool of water and Mufasa appeared in the sky, Simba started shaking, not randomly but in a pattern, and his sobs sounded like in beat to the shakes. Then Mufasa reached down and opened his mouth wide, and Simba just walked along and disappeared. Rafiki then looked into the screen and whispered, "The circle of life is a lie. All die, all perish. Your time is drawing near. Heil Hitler." As he didn't say my name again, that was a relief. The game skipped 2 whole levels and found myself at the start of the last level, Pride Rock. It seemed like normal until I moved Simba forward. Instead of moving immediately, fighting Scar as he's supposed to, he just ran through the empty level. No hyenas, no fire, no Scar. It was like this until I got to the top of the rock, where Simba and Scar are supposed to have the final fight. I was shocked at who was waiting at the top. Mufasa. He didn't even have a sprite in the game. I was wondering for a second if I was supposed to fight him. He was Simba's dad after all, but Mufasa leapt onto Simba and began to violently maul him, ripping off his right foreleg. He flung the leg off the rock, and I moved Simba and he hobbled up to his dad and jumped, mauling him as well. The battle was quite even, Mufasa and Simba ripping off piece of each other. After about 10 minutes of fighting, I lost control of them. Nothing I did affected the fight. They were fighting on their own now. Suddenly, Simba jumped onto his dad, causing them to somersault off the edge of the Pride Rock to their dooms. Then the screen flashed several times. The screen returned, and the screen switched to the very realistic picture of Mufasa and Simba's mangled bodies lying in a heap under Pride Rock. Then the screen twisted on itself again, and Scar's skull appeared in front of the picture. I screamed when the skull spoke. "Heather, Satan lives in the depths of each good soul. You can't escape him, you can't fight him, give up before he tears you apart." And the screen flashed and showed a new picture. It was me, sitting in front of the screen. Then the computer went black and shut off. As much as I tried, the computer would not turn on again. I still can't get it to turn on. Every night I see those images, I hear those words, "Give up before he tears you apart." Sometimes in the middle of the night, I look at the computer and that skull is there on the screen. I can feel something in my house. It's present. My mom and dad cannot feel it. Their innocence hasn't been taken away from them, as mine has. This is why I'm writing this. My dreams have turned to nightmares, my sweet memories into traumatizing ones. Nothing is left of me anymore, and I'm going to take Scar's advice. These are my last words, and I feel compelled to ask you, what are you going to do? What do you have to live for? After I told my mom and dad when they got home, they were shocked. Then I went to the local church to have a blessing, and now I currently work at a USA Holocaust Museum down in Washington, D.C. for National History, and I brought along my Simba plush, as well as Nala plushie, and Kimba, the White Lion plushie. Wow, that was lengthy as hell. But surprisingly, I was going to have this under the Shitpasta section, but I decided not to, because this is a pretty decent creepypasta, by the way. So, the reason why there's only the blood and gore cliches is sure that's something that was used correctly, sort of in this story, but what was with the Nazi thing, okay? Nazis are not going to make your story scary. If they were, then that just wouldn't make sense. So, Nazis in that propaganda are a pretty serious thing, because they were what took out a lot of Jews in World War II. However, none of them would be alive, and saying that two Nazis would create this bootleg copy of The Lion King is kind of just stupid in my opinion. Now, there is one more cliche, and it's length. Length is the most important thing about the creepypasta. Now, this was close to being the longest creepypasta I have read. Squidward Suicide was one of the longest ones I've read, so yeah. And what creepypasta would you want me to read next? And what things would you think would make this story better? This is Geoffrey Sambursky, and I am out.